it's a new generation of Midlanders who believe in what this community stands for. They believe in the future of this community for their families, and they're willing to put their money where their mouth is. And that is a huge legacy that I don't take credit for, but I'm thankful that it's happening while I'm mayor, and I look forward to seeing it continue.
Terra.
Yo.
The mayor is here.
I know.
Do we call you Your Highness Mayor?
Mayor, the Honorable Lori Blong.
The Honorable Lori Blong. I love that.
Lori is great.
Lori, perfect. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming in today.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate
Glad to be here.
stopping by. You've been here before at our studios. We're very gracious for that. You're welcome back anytime.
Thank you.
You can come back every week if you want.
I'm thankful to have you here in Midland. We've needed something like this for a long time.
We're trying. We are trying to get the media out here in Midland. That's my background. So like I was saying before the cameras, don't know a thing about the oil and gas industry. Not here to really talk to you about oil and gas.
Okay.
You'd be talking to me like a 4-year-old.
We'll give you a crash course sometime.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm a upstream, midstream, downstream. I've heard those before.
Right.
In fracking.
Yeah.
I've heard.
Got some jargon going.
For sure. I'm very much interested in the fact that you are a mayor, right? I know growing up, I think we're roughly around the same age group here.
Yep.
The Richard Scarry books.
Yes.
Busy Town books.
Absolutely.
That was my
That's your industry
education
foundation.
That was me. What does a mayor do? Can you kind of talk us through like just the journey? I know you're starting in city council first. Can you talk us just through the journey of getting into essentially politics in Midland?
Absolutely. So for me, I would take it back a couple years before that, where I started to become aware of things I was really frustrated about in Midland. I was born and raised here and then moved away for several years and then had come back and was raising a young family. And so I fell into a niche. You've probably been around groups like this where everybody was just griping a lot about our community and about things we were frustrated by. And that is not something that I'm okay with, griping for a really long time. And I want to be an action-oriented person, and I like having goals and accomplishing things. And so it came to a head for me really Christmas, December of 2018. And my husband and I did a little retreat together. And I told him, like, we either have to move or I have to get deeply involved with some of these things that we're frustrated about. And he said, well, our business is here and our family is here and we're happy, we're good, we're not moving. And I said, okay, well, then I'm getting deeply involved. And so that started out for me in writing some op-eds that the MRT graciously ran for me. I had a series that ran several of those. I think I wrote 18 of them and they ran something like 6 or 8 of them over that. And by the time the summer got around in 2019, I was being asked by various people to consider running for public office, but that was not where my heart or goals started. It was really, I see some things I'm concerned about. Let me start getting involved in local committees and boards and then also writing some things to draw attention to these concerns about how we might be able to solve the problems we face. Speaking
of your editorials,
yes,
I found your blog.
Yeah.
The Blong Blog?
It was
Nice.
Some of it was probably pretty painful. It's like a bunch of stuff about raising kids and that sort of thing.
It was very personal.
Yeah.
I didn't go into too much in the personal side because it's very touching. You're a great writer.
Thank you.
One of the articles that stood out, and I believe the MRT picked up on it,
Yes.
was you said basically like, I'm not going to misquote you, but basically if Austin is weird and Dallas is flashy and Lubbock is young and Houston is humongous, which is, we've got to figure out a different word for Houston. But basically said, what is Midland, right? And your word was tenacious.
I think that Midland has long been a place where people are willing to try new ideas. The Wildcatter spirit that people talk about, for your listeners that are not familiar with the oil business, a Wildcatter is a person who's willing to go out and drill a risky well, spend millions of dollars in a place where they don't know for sure if oil will come in. And so a Wildcatter spirit in this area has really become the example or the way that we talk about people who are really willing to take a risk and they know that they could lose everything on it. And so Midland has been built on the backs of people like that. And what it has created here is this culture of risk-taking, but also the ability to stand up and try it again if you flop. And Midland is, and I wrote that before I was involved in politics, but I would say today, I believe that Midland is tenacious more than I believed it when I wrote it initially.
Okay, I was going to ask you, does it still hold true?
It absolutely does.
You explained basically like wanting to just take action, right? But like, how do you go from city council to mayor? And the real question I want to ask you is, what's the type of person that wants to be the the mayor. You're clearly not in it for the money.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So, like, that's a huge step, in my
There
opinion.
has to be something a little bit wrong with you to engage yourself in politics in your hometown, in the place where you are doing life and raising your family. I think there's if you get involved in state or federal politics, there's a sense of being removed from that when you come home. I don't think that they're dealing with the same things in their grocery store or in the daily life that is involved in all of that. But when you're involved in politics in your hometown, then you're at the grocery store. The first time I went to the grocery store after I was elected, it took me like 45 minutes longer than it should have because people would just stop me and talk to me about things. And that's a great thing. I want to be available for that. But it definitely changes the dynamic of living in your hometown.
Sure.
Because as a mom, like you're on a time crunch. I'm sure
Right.
everything is very like scheduled, and it's like I have 20 minutes to go to the grocery store.
Yes. Yeah. So you gotta get through things quicker.
Yeah.
But I think that the other part of what you're talking about there is figuring out how to navigate your real life. Because I didn't suddenly become not a Midlander and not a mom and not a business person. I didn't disassociate myself from any of those other identities. I just added an identity. And so those things all have to coexist in a new way.
I didn't even think about the out in public or at the grocery store type of situation. My brain immediately goes to, one, do you read the comments? Like, I mean...
I do.
Oh, you do?
I do.
Oh,
Don't
my
do
gosh.
it.
Good for you.
I don't
mean,
read them all, and I don't respond.
Yeah.
I feel like very little productive takes place on social media. I think there are people who would challenge me there, and I would hold fast. Having done this in earnest for serious for the last 4 years, I can't think of anything positive that's been accomplished on social media other than maybe spreading awareness about something.
Yeah,
But
just
we
putting
don't
out a
solve
post.
problems there.
Yeah.
And so if you have something you'd like me to respond to, I would encourage anybody to reach out to me and email me or call me. My phone number is widely circulated in this town. But don't try to send me a message on social media and think that that's going to get me to respond because I'm just not going to engage there.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I tell clients to never engage. It leads to a lot of bad things. But I guess from my perspective, it's that aspect of like, okay, we post silly clips from podcast episodes and the comments that come through.
Yes.
And guess what? We're not the mayor, right? And so from that perspective, I have to imagine it's like every decision you make, right? And you're doing it for the holistic and the overall growth and vision of this city, you're going to potentially trigger
Oh, absolutely.
50% or more,
Yeah.
right, of the population. I never even thought about those. Are those the same people that will come talk to you in the grocery store? My guess is probably not,
No.
right? Most people are a bit more abrupt on social media behind a keyboard.
There's
Keyboard
a
warriors.
few people that are active on social media in Midland that I know personally, and I see them. Happened on Saturday. I ran into somebody at an event where I know that person says stuff on social media about lots of people in this community that are mutual friends that person would never have the courage to say in person.
Yeah.
So it's a small town relatively, and so we do know people. But I would say most of my interactions with people in this community is incredibly gracious and encouraging and uplifting. The naysayers and the trolls on social media are certainly the exception, and they are not out and about and engaging with the community.
So we posted something. This is the fun times for us, right? Because I want to get your feedback. You're the mayor.
Sure.
Here's what we hear all the time. There's nothing to do in Midland. And then when a post or an announcement goes out that there's going to be something to do in Midland, aka
A zoo.
a beautiful zoo, it seems like,
Aren't we excited about
that
that?
is
are.
privately
Awesome.
funded.
Yeah.
I love the comments because I'm in social media and
Right.
I'm essentially a puppeteer. But you couldn't stop the people who are like, we don't need a zoo. We don't need a zoo. How do you win? Or what's your approach in situations like that?
I think you have to have a really strong sense of what you believe to be able to do this job well and to do it for very long. I think there are people who get engaged because they have a niche interest. So they want to see their issue pushed through or they want to fight against this other thing. I don't think that will sustain you very long because you'll either get it accomplished and then what? Or you'll fail to get it accomplished and you'll lose your sense of self in that. And so if your motivation is really for the benefit of the place that you're serving and for the people that are associated with that, then I think you have the ability to sustain that forward. For me personally, in my engagement with Midland, it's really because I want this to be a place that's better when I leave it than it was when I found it. And, I like I said, I was born here, And I'm unwilling to just settle for the status quo and be a griper. And so I will always, no matter where I live, I will be a person who's contributing to making it better. You have to have that grounding and that centered perspective to be able to go forward.
For the people in Midland who do want to start like getting deeply involved, what would you recommend like their first step be?
I really think we have some great philanthropic opportunities in Midland, and that's where I started. Habitat for Humanity is something that's really near and dear to my heart, and I think they do great things in our community for a population that really is hardworking and needs a little bit of a step up to be able to be really successful. And so things like that where you can get involved, you begin to address a need in our community, but you also begin to learn the board process and you learn the local philanthropic community that's so generous here. And it's almost like a gateway drug. The first one you do, you're going to realize this is so satisfying to be able to do good work and see the outcomes in people's lives. But it also gives you opportunity for the next opportunity. And so for me, that's how it happened. It built on itself.
What are you most excited about? Like, there's a lot of projects in the works, right? You've got clearly the zoo. You've got the hotel that's going to be right next door, right? Another hot ticket item.
Yes.
Which, again, I come from the city of hotels. They very much make sense. But I don't know. I don't try to understand, right, the complaints. I just sit there and go like, what do you out there, what do you want out of Midland? And are you going to do anything about it
Right.
Right?
You did a really excellent podcast with Sarah Harris a while back that I watched. She's a friend of mine in addition to working with the MDC. But I think she articulated that really well. And she talked about Midland has to decide who we want to be when we grow up. And any sort of economic development deal right now in the city of Midland is polarizing. It doesn't matter if it's a zoo that's privately funded or if it's a hotel that's a public-private partnership or something in between. It will be polarizing. There will be people that are opposed to it and there will be people that are deeply supportive. And so that we are going to have to decide as a community, whose voice are we going to listen to? Is there a compromise to be found? And I think in some circumstances there is a compromise to be found. But ultimately, we're either going to decide if we would like to be Big Spring and not that there's anything wrong with Big Spring, but it was a big city and then it declined. Or we could be Frisco, or a community that is continually growing and reinventing and advancing the ball. And I'm unwilling to be a city that grew to a certain size and then begins to decline. That's not an option.
Yeah.
And so we have to be able to make decisions that are going to advance the ball. And we have to operate, as Sarah said, we have to operate within the parameters that exist. And if you're going to have nice things come to your community, then there will have to be a city participation. That's the way it works in the state of Texas.
Is there just a fraction of people who are just ultra nostalgic about?
I think that's part of it. And I think a lot of after so many years pass, maybe people forget how bad it was during the downtimes.
Yeah.
And it was like a ghost town in certain parts, and it was just not great. So,
my senior year of high school, oil was trading at $8 a barrel. I remember one of my good friends in high school, his dad committed suicide, because of some of these things. That's certainly an extreme example, but it is an example of what happens when things are hard here. And I think that there are people who've come through the tough times in the 80s and 90s who now believe, hey, wait, we always have to make decisions as though the next bust is around the corner. I would say we know that the next downturn is around the corner. How many of these have we been through now, in the last 40 plus years of our lives in Midland? And so rather than saying, oh, doomsday is coming, we need to say, yes, there will be a downturn. What good things can we do right now while we have the opportunity that help advance the ball even through those downturns? And it's a paradigm shift.
Yeah. I feel like many people are just self-serving, right? It's like, it's what I want, and if it's not what I want or I think I want, who cares, I guess, right? And then I don't know if tax dollars involved in whatever. I mean, I don't know. I've kind of just grown up just paying taxes. I don't really...
We don't really think about where it
No,
goes.
I don't. Yeah, it is what it is. Like, I personally am not one of these people who are like complaining about the roads and the roads and the roads and the roads and the pothole in the it's not funny, but it is, just because I feel like I've been privy to enough podcast episodes producing that I'm going like, are millions of dollars going into the roads across Texas or West Texas as a whole?
I think that there is a lack of understanding in some cases. I also think there's a fundamental fiscal conservatism is the term that is thrown around. I consider myself to be a fiscal conservative, and all things being equal, I would love for it to be totally free market capitalism where everything succeeds or fails on the merits of its own, product or whatever it's selling. I do prefer that. The reality in the state of Texas is that we have economic incentives. And so if the city of Midland wants to have nice things, we are competing against other cities who are using incentives. All things being equal, I, as a fiscal conservative, would probably choose not to have those incentives. But because they exist in the state of Texas, we will either participate and use the laws as they currently exist and use those mechanisms, or we will not have any of those things come to Midland. And so, a downtown hotel in the state of Texas is not going to go to a community unless they have an incentive package.
Sure. We can kind of see the vision of a downtown where it's very family friendly, lots of small shops and businesses and bustling. Mm-hmm. What do you see? Like, what are you hoping for downtown to eventually become?
I do want downtown to be family friendly. I want Midland to be family friendly. If you look at the age and the demographics of our community, we're not interested in being Las Vegas or San Diego or, there's a lot of other communities that you can go visit there and enjoy it, but that's not the identity of Midland. We are a family-oriented community, and we want things that are good for families with children to be able to do together. And so I think a downtown that reflects that has as you said, shops and small businesses and restaurants and things like that. But also I would like to see more programming around our central business district with the park and all of those things to be able to have. We have something in the works. We're calling it Chalk the Block around the park to get kids and families out and engaged with some arts and be able to use chalk as a medium to do that. We have several of those kinds of programming ideas to be able to drive traffic downtown. I believe that continues to sustain the economy of downtown. When you drive traffic to downtown, then you've got people spending their dollars and their days downtown. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities there, but we have to be strategic about those things. And not everything is an economic incentive opportunity. Some things are just, we need to have the economic incentive that is going to bring the biggest bang for its buck to drive increased development after that can be a free market thing. But, you mentioned roads a little bit ago, too. I think that we have to have reasonable, sustained, prudent investment in maintenance and operations of our roads. If we don't, then we get ourselves into a major road bond issue like we've been in since 2017 where we've got to catch up. Mm-hmm. And so it's the sustained investment that prevents us from having to catch up in the future.
I come from essentially a single, industry city, gambling in Las Vegas. Energy and oil and gas is obviously pretty dominant here.
Right.
Is there anything is there types of industries that you feel like are you're hoping to get here?
I believe that the Space Force and the spaceport is really an opportunity for success in our community. I think it gets a lot of bad press sometimes, and it certainly did early on when it was first formed as the spaceport with our airport. But there's so many success stories coming out of there and so much growth and also dollars of investment from the private markets and also from national security dollars coming from the federal government. So that's a viable industry, and I think that Midland needs to start talking more about it as a viable industry. I think that's probably the lowest hanging fruit and the place where we can optimize the most to diversify. The other thing to consider, and I had this conversation actually earlier this week with an economist that I have talked to occasionally, and according to this person, once you get above about 175,000 to 220,000 people, then your economy begins to sustain itself just with the things that it requires to sustain that population. And so the business owners for grocery stores and for fast food restaurants and other restaurants and clothing stores, all of those things become the driving economy for that. You still we'll always have oil and gas and energy.
Sure.
But I think we may not be quite there, but we're approaching. And with our growth pattern, we're approaching that tipping point where we begin to sustain the population that we have through the things that require to just live life here. The other thing I would say that we have a lot of opportunity that's probably untapped are some of the other parts of the oil and gas industry or the energy industry. We've primarily focused on oil and gas production and upstream type issues for most of the history of Midland. And we're shipping all of those products out so that they can be utilized and refined and then sent out ultimately to market. We are missing an opportunity by sending all of those things to Oklahoma or to the Gulf Coast or wherever we're shipping them to through the midstream process. There are opportunities for us to capture value if we made some investments in refineries and other things. And I'm not just talking about a $6 billion refinery, which, I mean, that the prices us out of the market. And
Right.
and you still have the transportation concerns. But there are a lot of other smaller, more incremental changes that we could make to our community to be able to have some serious growth to our economy in that.
You're an owner of an energy company.
Correct.
I'm assuming that's, the $75 a month salary from the mayor.
That's correct.
That's where it's supplemented.
That's before taxes. So it's like $69.28 after taxes.
Stop.
One
Juice
small
is
trip
not worth
to
the squeeze.
HEB.
That's right.
Okay, so for a oil and gas energy novice like myself, I mean, where do you suggest I would start if I really wanted to get the basis?
There are actually classes that you can take at Midland College where you can get some intro to energy.
I am
kinds
45.
of-
Does that
That's-
matter?
No.
I just signed up for Midland College.
So what are you taking?
I haven't decided yet,
Oh.
but I got accepted.
I think also a lot of people of our generation and even younger than us are looking to talk more about what they do. We want to market our communities well. We want to talk well about the industry that we're a part of and that drives our local economy, drives our state economy. I mean, oil and gas severance taxes are driving the economy of the state of Texas,
Sure.
whether we want to own that as a state or not. And so there's a lot of people that are proud of that, want to talk about it. There's another group, it's called the Permian Basin Petroleum Association, PBPA.
Okay.
There's a guy named Stephen Robertson who works for the PBPA. He's very articulate and able to communicate about just general baseline understanding of the industry. So I think there's several places where you could start with that.
The first couple of years I was here, I almost felt like it was like I don't know anything about oil and gas, and it was almost like, hey, and that's what sets me apart.
It's your differentiating factor.
Right?
Yeah.
But now I'm starting to feel like I'm kind of missing out on a lot of things. I mean, I'm producing an oil and gas podcast. I said I've been waiting for 2 years for somebody to approach me and go like, hey, we want to talk about oil and gas, because I'm like, I can't host an oil and gas podcast.
Right.
That would be sussed out very quickly.
Right.
I can produce them and get eyeballs to them. But, I've had people in here like Tracy Bentley and having these conversations, I'm going like, I don't even know what you're talking about. And now I'm starting to think it's becoming a bit of a crutch here, because I want to have intelligent conversations.
Sure.
So Midland College I can look to just get some classes. I did see on your website that you have a whole like hiring software behind the scenes.
do.
Like it's very tech savvy.
Yeah,
Over there at
that's-
Octane.
That's my husband. So he is. Whenever we first stood up, we had a consulting firm. So we would provide. Almost think of it as a general contractor for your house. If you're going to build a new house, you need a professional who knows everything about how to do that well, and then he's going to hire subcontractors to do all the parts of it. Well, we had a consulting firm that provided the general contractor to drill an oil well, or to frack an oil well, or to take it from dirt to producing oil. And so whenever we stood that consulting firm up, for a while it was fairly slow growth, but we hit this tipping point where we were growing so rapidly that we needed a technological solution to manage all the applications that we were getting, but also to be able to deploy people faster. And so we would have a major oil and gas company that would call us and say, hey, I need 15 completions consultants. Can you make that happen? Wow. We needed to be able to find 15 guys that had the qualifications and met the criteria that they were looking for, that had the experience. And so we built out that software. Jared built out that software to be able to address that. And it's been hugely beneficial to us.
Yeah, I was going to fill it out as a goof. It started off like, do you have 12 years experience? And I go, sure. Experience in what? I don't know. But
it probably kicked you out at some point.
I didn't even bother because I didn't want to be that guy.
Yeah.
But it's very cool.
Yeah.
So going back to the small businesses that support the large businesses, as small business owners, just saw an article yesterday. I can't verify that whoever wrote this thing, but the top 11 cities in the U.S. to start a business in 2024, Midland's number 7.
Midland is number 7.
Pretty good.
We're also, I believe, number 7 in the nation for fastest growing communities as well. So there's a lot to be said for being in Midland right now. Tons of opportunity.
I mean, thank goodness we're fixing our roads, because if we get an
Thank goodness.
influx of people,
That's right.
they're not going to hold up.
That's right.
Austin's number 1. Do you agree with that?
Place to start a business?
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to start a business there. But I don't know what metrics they use. I don't know if I
Sure.
agree with that or not.
I feel
But
like between cost of living and
And true
congestion.
traffic issues. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really difficult to navigate Austin the times that I'm there for other things. So I think to go to a place where there are not 14 people who do what you do. You know, I mean, you guys are a prime example. You came to a community, identified a need, and you're meeting that need. And you don't really have any competition that I know about. I mean, you have other people that are running podcasts,
Sure.
but nobody that has a studio like this, nobody that's created the niche for themselves that you guys have built. There's so much opportunity here because there's not already 14 people who are doing it. And so I think that's a huge benefit for entrepreneurialism and for people who have a vision to own something and to start something and to work hard to get it done.
city council meetings. I was trying to find, like, is there a schedule for those?
So it's published for the full year.
Okay.
We vote on the schedule for regularly called city council meetings in like December.
Okay.
And then they're put on the calendar. So any of those regularly called ones, you can get on the city calendar or city website right now and see that calendar.
Okay.
In general, it's twice a month.
Okay.
On Tuesday mornings at 10 a.m. They may change or vary just slightly, but typically that's the way that it works. We only do one in March because we take spring break off, and then we typically only have one in December and one in July.
Okay.
But otherwise, we have 2 a month.
Are they wild like on TikTok?
I hope we've never had one on TikTok. We sometimes have very well attended, read, packed, standing room only.
Wow.
People. We had one recently. I think it was the hotel deal where we had people in an overflow room in the basement conference room because it wasn't safe for them to all be in council chambers.
Yeah.
So, but they don't. One of my big goals in my own communication, but also in meetings that I lead, is I want the communication to be gracious. There is no reason to be ugly or unkind. We can all conduct ourselves reasonably and in order, and so I try really hard to run a meeting that way. I can't control everyone else's behavior, but I do feel like if you set a tone for this meeting, it's going to be professional and we're going to be respectful of one another. I've found that I'm mostly able to do that. Now, I may not be able to do it always, but so far I have been. So
I just feel like it'd be interesting. You get to learn more about, like, what's going on. I don't know.
Yeah, they are interesting. Some of them are super boring.
What?
I have. It's true. It's
Sounds.
true. But there's, and honestly, the more well-oiled the machine, and I don't, machine sounds like a derogatory term in this case, but I don't mean it that way. The more well-oiled all of the processes of city staff and council are, the more things are just clicking along, the more boring it should be. We're just doing the business of the city. We have to buy fertilizer for the park, and we have to buy a new HVAC system for the airport, and we have to, a lot of it's just votes like that where we just have to take care of business. It's really just the bigger issues that are contentious. Those are the things that get more interesting.
We're a conflict-driven society, right? At this point, we just want the little snippets.
Yep.
You talked a little bit about building a legacy, but like if we're sitting in 20 years, right? What would you say that your legacy, or what would you want to have accomplished, or just see Midland as a whole?
I would like to see Midland invest in itself in many different ways. And I think that some of that investment has already begun to take place while I've been mayor. Not that I did it, but the Midland Athletic Syndicate and the work that group is doing, those guys are all people that I went to high school with.
Oh,
and
really?
I'm super proud of the work that they're doing and the vision that they have for our community. The other thing I will say, I believe the failure of the Hogan Park deal was deeply painful for me. It was something that I had worked on for years and was really committed to. And so to see that fail and go down in flames was certainly a painful thing. But to see the amount of investment that this community is making in itself out of kind of the aftermath of that is so beneficial. And I think that the Midland Athletic Syndicate and the zoo and the preserve and even just some of the smaller investments that have taken place around our community, it's a new generation of Midlanders who believe in what this community stands for. They believe in the future of this community for their families, and they're willing to put their money where their mouth is. And that is a huge legacy that I don't take credit for, but I'm thankful that it's happening while I'm mayor, and I look forward to seeing it continue. The other thing, I think that we're in a state in our society, not just in Midland or in Texas or in the United States, but in our society as a whole, where decorum and gracious communication is lacking. And I want to be known for being a person who will work with people, even people that I disagree with. And I want to be known for being a person who will listen to ideas that are not my own, but see how I can help advance those. But really to look forward to the things that bring us hope and bring us promise and bring us growth in our community. Those are the kinds of things that I want to stand for. And so far, I feel like that's the direction we're going. So it's a good thing.
We super appreciate you being here. I mean, again, I don't think we're terribly political. I know I'm not.
It is really important to me when you turn on the news media or you enter into a political conversation with a lot of people, especially conservative people. I find this to be uniquely true. There's this doomsday mentality. Like the world is falling apart and everything's terrible and awful and we've got to get in there and save it. But we can't save it because it's just so far gone. I just don't feel that way. And it's not a political line. It's not a marketing stunt or anything. I believe that we have great opportunity available to us. I think we have a great generation of leaders that are coming up. I think we have kids. I mean, you guys have kids. I've got kids where there is so much promise in the future generation and so much opportunity that's available to us. Do we have hard things? Yes, we do. But we have more opportunity than we know what to do with, and we have more technological advances and more economic benefits. There's so many things to be excited about, and I think we have to take accountability as leaders with a voice. You guys are leaders with a voice. With your podcast and the other things that you're working on, we have to take responsibility for flipping that narrative to say, no, there is great promise on the horizon. We're actually walking through some of the best opportunities we've ever seen in this community. Let's do the work to make sure that that continues to be true and that we're leaving it better than we found it.
I like that.
Very well said. And thank you so much. Thank you so much for giving us your time. I know you're super busy. You're running the town, the city, in fact.
The city manager is running the town.
Okay.
The city, so the mayor, and this is free. You
Please.
can cut this if you want to.
No, let's go.
The way that Midland is actually what's called a weak mayor system. So like a city like Chicago, I don't actually know how Las Vegas or some of those cities are, but a city like Chicago where the mayor is literally the CEO of the community, like running things as a decision maker in that capacity. In a city like Midland, we have a weak mayor system, which means that we have what's almost like a board of directors. So the city council is the board of directors and the mayor is the chair of that board of directors.
Okay.
But the city staff is actually carrying out the operational work of the city. And so we have a city manager that's got over 1,000 people working downline from him that are carrying out the actual work of the city. They're bringing things to us to make budgetary decisions and policy decisions about as the board, but they're carrying out that work. And so the city... The mayor and the city council are able to come in and say, we don't like the direction that this is going. We want it changed. We give direction, we give strategy, we give input, but it's actually on them to go out and execute that change. So I think it's worked well in the city of Midland. We've had some mayors that were more up in the business of running the day-to-day of the city, and then some of them that were more willing to sit back and truly be a board chair. I hope that I'm an engaged mayor, but that I'm not, unnecessarily getting in the middle of things that are not mine to do.
I mean, I imagine you can't be in the weeds of everything. I mean, you
can't.
Yeah.
It's a huge, $52 million annual budget, $52 million where we are. I care about every single dollar and where it's being spent, but I'm looking at large financials and figuring out
Sure.
how the general direction that we're headed, and where there's problems, we dig in deep. But, the city manager is really doing a great job.
Yeah, so go yell at that guy.
Yeah.
People do. He gets his fair share.
I'm sure. I can only imagine. Well, again, thank you so much for being here. I don't want to take up all your time. I know you got tons of things to do. See you again next week, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Because thankfully that you're coming to our podcast studio like all the time now. So we do appreciate that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you for kind of reading up on my backstory. It's nice to have a conversation about stuff. Some of that stuff I hadn't even read or thought about in a while.
I mean, that blog went back to like 2012, 2013.
When he said he found your blog, I was like, from high school?
Yeah, she was like, ooh, what crushes does he have on celebrities or something like that? Yeah, that's not what I was looking for.
No.